Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old-timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs.
Hey y'all, welcome to today's show. I got a big announcement. I gave this little tease last week. If you listened to the New Year's Day show, let's say it wasn't exactly my most popular show, but I like to be consistent. I like to keep things. I want you to be able to count on me every Monday morning or even Saturday, Sunday evening, whatever. You get to hear my show, or you can listen to it throughout the week. And I've done this. For over 3 years now, and I've never missed a week, and God willing, I will never miss a week. So let's get into the topics. So the big announcement. I am releasing a new book today. Yes, book number 13. Yeah, believe it or not, I've written 13 books now, and this one is one I have been wanting to do from the very beginning. The way I got into herbal medicine was actually through my passion for foraging. I originally began learning from some of the old mountain folks and from field guides and on my own about foraging for wild foods. And that's a passion that was really instilled in me and planted in me from the earliest age. I've told you before about my grandfather. He was sort of a pioneer of permaculture before there was even a name for such, before Bill Mollison ever wrote his first book. My grandfather was designing the farm with efficient systems and edible landscaping. So what my mother would do was actually, when I was little, I could barely walk very much. She'd put me in a wagon and pull me around and just pick all this wild, not wild, but perennial, I guess you would say. It didn't take much maintenance. Fruit and nuts and everything he had planted. And so it became a very natural concept for me just to, walk out into the yard and pick something and eat it. And that's not a natural concept for most kids, apparently. Probably the first plant I remember was sheep sorrel. She taught me to eat or chew sheep sorrel. That is one of the wild sorrels that we call a weed for no apparent reason. That is quite delicious. It's very sour. It has a lemony, if you like Sour Patch Kids and such, you'd love to chew on the stems of sheep sorrel. Now, the leaves of sheep sorrel are small. You'd have to gather a whole lot to make a salad, but they're very edible. You can eat the leaves and chew the stems and just really enjoy the plant. Another one of my first memories was wild mustard. I was out with my grandmother picking mustard in the garden, and I looked over in the area between the garden and the horse pasture, and I'm like, isn't that the same plant growing right there? And she's like, yeah, but that's the wild mustard. I said, but it's mustard, just the same, right? And she's like, yeah, but it's tougher and it's a little more bitter, and we stick with the garden mustard. So the next time I was out, I started eating wild mustard, and yes, it's peppery, and I came to love it. So really by my teens, I was a pretty accomplished forager, really. And I was getting into mushroom hunting and all that, especially when we moved back to the mountains of North Carolina. That's where I discovered ramps, my all-time favorite wild vegetable. Anyway, I have decided to write, it's going to be a series of cookbooks. And, there are many reasons I want to break it into series. First of all, This is I'm going to go ahead and give you the title, the Spring Foraging Cookbook. So, beginning like in March, depending on where you live, you'll be able to walk outside if you have this cookbook and look for the plants that are described in it. Those first wonderful green plants that are poking up in early spring are some of the very best, absolutely. And I give you recipes for it, for each one of them. Now, I'm going to tell you what this book is not. It is not a field guide. I've told you my philosophy on this before. I'm going to reiterate it. I have a shelf full of field guides. I mean, I have dozens of field guides for each type of plant. Trees, especially trees of the American Southeast. I have like, I don't know, 3, 4 books. Weeds. When the book will discuss our herbs from today, the medicinal weeds and grasses of the American Southeast. I have, I don't even know, 7, 8 books on what are considered weeds. When it comes to herbs, I probably have a dozen, and I can go on. I mean, shrubs, woody vines, all the books I've written. It's very important for me to learn to identify these plants and such. Why do I have so many field guides? Well, in any plant, I don't care what it is, if you go out and take a picture of it, and you show it to someone and you say, this is, I don't know, shepherd's purse or wild mustard or something, whatever. And yeah, it is. You've given someone a legitimate picture of it. But if that same plant is growing in different climate, in different soil conditions, with more or less water, in a different climate, like the mountains at 5,000 feet where I live, that plant's going to look very different. And it could be the exact same plant. In fact, mustard's a good example. That would be growing in the coastal swamps of North Carolina or the sandhills. The color is going to be different. The texture of the leaves is going to be slightly different. The growth, the size and shape is going to be different. Time of year. That plant's going to look different in spring than it does in summer or in fall. And of course, in the winter, it's just going to be a dry, nothing sticking up there, if it's even that. I do not put pictures of the plants in my book. Now, on the cover of the book, Spring Foraging Cookbook, there's a beautiful little nettle plant that Jolanta Wittib took a picture of in Austria. And where I live in the mountains of North Carolina, that nettle's going to look very similar. Now, you go down the mountain, and nettles aren't as abundant. They don't grow as thickly. They tend to get a little more scraggly. So it's actually a pretty good example. I don't put pictures in my book because I don't want my books to be used for plant ID. If you want books for plant ID, I suggest you start with Thomas Elpel's Botany in a Day, so you can learn to identify the different families of plants. If it's a mint, it's got square stems and alternate leaves. You know that. If it's a mustard, it has 5 petals, I believe, 5 petals and 4 sepals. Is that right? I'd have to double check. I know them by sight. You need to get Botany a Day, a good field guide. The Peterson guide. Peterson field guides, I think, are the absolute best. They have some color pictures, a lot of black and white drawings. You're learning more plant characteristics, the specific details that will enable you to identify the specific plant. Like in the rose family of plants, whether it's an apple tree or a blackberry bush, those flowers are going to be specific to the details. I think it's 5 petals and anyway. See, I can't even keep this stuff straight in my head. So that I don't know. This is not an ID book. And in this day and age where people have smartphones, I hate to carry a phone, honestly. I've kind of gotten a little more used to it recently, and I'll tell you why here in a second. I actually owe a deep debt of gratitude to a very special young lady who helped me with this book, with the editing. Phone apps. You can get plant ID apps. With a field guide and a plant ID app, I mean, you're really set. I mean, for me as a kid, all I had was field guides. The old Audubon field guides, Peterson field guide. The pictures never looked like the plant. I had to learn those characteristics of botany to help me identify the plant. I did have a few mentors in my later teens, early 20s. But yeah, it was kind of hit or miss for me. I mean, I took a lot of risks potentially eating something poisonous, especially when it comes to mushrooms. I didn't include a lot of mushrooms in this book because I really think mushrooms, you need someone to teach you. You know, I included morels because morels are easy to identify. Um, Oyster mushrooms aren't too hard. There are few that I think are beginner entry level mushrooms, but I wanted to stick with the spring plants. And oysters are really more summer, late summer into fall, and even here in winter, you can still find some oyster mushrooms. They're not a spring mushroom, whereas the morel truly is. What this is a cookbook. And if you read my Omnivore's Guide to Home Cooking cookbook, which is very my most popular book probably, you know my style of cooking. I don't tell you a lot of measurements. I don't. I teach you technique. I tell you how to combine flavors, and then I really encourage you to tailor the recipe to your taste. A little more of this, a little less of that. Really, I never want you to look at it and say, well, I don't have this ingredient, I can't make this recipe. I usually give you several options. You can add this, or this, or that, and this combination. And this is, I think, a great cookbook. I'm really pleased with this cookbook, by the way. These are some of my favorite recipes, stuff I really cook a lot. I mean, living in the mountains where I do, I have this just thousands of acres of national forest and such that I can wander around in, public land, private land. I do a lot of foraging, and I include a lot of wild foods. I mean, just in my yard, most of these plants grow. I mean, sometimes I've actually planted them. Most times they're wild. Um, I posted on Grow Network yesterday that I would be announcing the book today, and a couple people said, I'm cautious. I'm kind of scared of foraging, and I said, well, let's stick with the basics. You know what a dandelion is. I'm going to give you some recipes on how to cook dandelions, from dandelion greens to a dandelion flower wine, which is delicious. You know what a plantain is. I'm going to teach you how to cook plantains. Um, Alliums, wild alliums. I give you the old forager's saying. If it looks like an onion, it smells like an onion, it's an onion. It may be wild onion, wild garlic, ramps, wild leeks. If it looks like an onion and smells like an onion, it's an onion, or an allium, more generally speaking. If it doesn't, if it looks like an onion but doesn't smell like an onion, it could be a very deadly plant. So these are. I mean, lily of the valley is can look very much like ramps, depending on what time of year. Lily of the valley has a digitalis-like effect. It slows the heart rate. If you eat too much of it, you drop dead. So, I mean, I give you this really common sense of sniff it. Does it smell like an onion? Okay, you're good. I mean, it's a lot of this stuff is so simple. I mean, pictures really aren't necessary. You know what a dandelion is, right? I give you recipes and I give you techniques, and I think you're going to love this. This is kind of what you experience like if you spent the weekend with me in the mountains. If it was spring, we'd go out and we'd catch a few trout, and I'd bring along some rice and some Creole seasoning. I got to have my Creole seasoning, and some onions, or pick ramps. Actually, in spring we'd be picking ramps or wild onions, whatever. Camp out, have a campfire, and eat all kinds of wild food because I love it. It's really it's been my passion since I was very young, and I think this passion, I really bring it to the book. You're going to really hear the excitement when I'm telling you about the different plants. In the book, I cover alfalfa, amaranth, angelica, asparagus, large-leaf aster, which is a really neat plant that not very many people know about. Basswood or linden, black locust, bladder campion, another one most people don't really use. Brambles such as blackberries and raspberries, and on this, because it's spring, we're looking at shoots and leaves. I'm going to save the berries for summer and fall. And I'm going to do one of these for each season. I'll probably put fall and winter together, but there's abundance in summer. This is the thing. The reason I wanted to do it specifically for the time is when you go out in March and April, these are the plants that are coming up. It's so much easier. That's really one of the huge aspects for plant ID and mushroom ID and everything. What time of year does that flower appear? Well, if you know what time of year that flower appears, you can cut out, or that berry or that mushroom, specifically, you can cut out, 50 to 60, maybe even 80% of plants that may look similar. So, I mean, that's why I really wanted to focus more on the timing of when these plants are in bloom, when they're sprouting, that's going to help you really with a good field guide, and you know when something's coming in. And I tell you usually where they grow, whether it's in the woods, near a creek, or in an open meadow. You really set. I mean, if I had had this book as a kid, I would have been a lot more confident of a forager and a cook because, I've been cooking for decades now, and I really give you my experience in that as well. There's a lot of good, classical technique in this book as well, just like my Omnivore's Guide to Home Cooking. Um, so I tell you about briars. Common briars, green briars, are one of the most common edible foods, believe it or not. And how much trouble do we take trying to eradicate briars from our landscape? And of course, the root has most of them are pretty much interchangeable with sarsaparilla. So medicinal, and I give you the medicinal properties as well. It's not just the culinary properties. I give you the medicinal as well. We talk about bugleweed. I've done a whole show on bugleweed, one of my favorite herbs. Bull thistle, burdock, calamus, caraway, cardamom pratense, cattails, chickweed, chicory, cleavers, clovers, corn salad, which is in the valerian family, which doesn't really grow wild around here. I grow it in the garden, but it may grow wild where you live if you're a little further north from me. Clintonia, comfrey, cow parsnip, dandelion, of course, daylily. And daylilies, I mean, so often overlooked as an edible food. I mean, just about everybody grows them as a landscaping flower, and they have tubers like little potatoes, and the flowers can be eaten like squash blossoms. They're really a phenomenal source of food. Let's see, dock, elder, erodium, evening primrose, false Solomon seal, fireweed, two varieties of fireweed, by the way. Forsythia, garlic mustard. Garlic mustard is one of my favorite wild edibles. It's considered an invasive weed. State of North Carolina is trying to eradicate it. I say eat it. It's delicious. It's like mustard greens with garlic on them. I mean, how can you go wrong? That's like very much to my taste. Just cook it in a little pork fat and put some vinegar on it, and then I'm a happy camper. Um, let's see, goat's beard. Oh, you'll love goat's beard and salsify. The roots taste like oysters. The tops taste like radish greens or mustard, anything in the brassica family. More like turnip greens, actually. Let's see. Ground ivy. Harbinger of spring. Such a pretty, very pretty and sweet-smelling flower. Honewort honeysuckle. God, this was a relatively new to me. As a kid, I always got the honeysuckle flowers and sucked the nectar out of them. My friend Cassie, you remember Cassie Clark? We did an interview with her a few weeks ago. She makes a syrup out of honeysuckle blossoms, and you can also make a wine out of it. And this is like, this is like the best smelling, most wonderful thing, tasting sweet thing if you can imagine. I mean, this is like the nectar of the gods, basically. All right, so horseradish, another one that can be very weedy, gets out of people's gardens, grows rampantly like garlic mustard. Indian cucumber, tons of that around my house. Hyssop or hedge nettle, Japanese knotweed, another weed people are trying to eradicate. It's in the buckwheat family, very edible, and somebody probably pay you to get some of that off their property. Japanese maple, actually the leaves are quite good. Jewelweed or touch-me-not, kudzu, the hated vine that ate the South, is one of the most nutritious vegetables and has many medicinal properties. Lady's thumb, lamb's quarters, which are just, if you like spinach, you'd love lamb's quarters. Mallow, marsh marigold, milkweed. Milkweed shoots are very much like asparagus. A lot of these plants, you can break them down. They're either going to be like asparagus, like spinach, or like a lettuce or a mustard. But then there's a lot in between. The wild alliums and the edible flowers, and But anyway, miner's lettuce, another one I have to grow because it's not native to my region. Absolutely delicious. Mints, morel mushrooms. I'll tell you all about morels. The mustards, nettles, Oregon grape, or pine, ostrich fern, maybe bracken. I tell you why health officials warn against bracken now, but ostrich fern seems to be perfectly good. These are what they call fiddleheads. Fiddlehead ferns, they're nice in spring, again, much like asparagus. Delicious, just delicious. Oxeye daisy, that's one of my favorite flowers, and it's quite tasty. Often used in Asian cooking, not so much in American. My influences are kind of, I got my Southern cooking. My family's half French. I do get into a lot of Asian cooking, a lot of Mexican cooking, German cooking, Polish and Ukrainian. I'm kind of all over the map with my tastes. A lot of North African cooking I really enjoy too. Tons of Italian recipes in here. Um, let's see. Oxide, well, I just said that. Peppergrass. I actually got to use a recipe from Apicius for that. Old ancient Roman cookbook that is so impressive. Apicius's recipes. If you get a good translation, or like you want to run to the kitchen and make them. If you get a bad translation, you're like, this sounds kind of disgusting. Just, some things are translated by a scholar and some by someone who actually knows how to cook. And somebody who knows how to cook does a little bit better with the translation if they can speak Latin. All right, so plantain, poke, prickly pear cactus, one of my all-time favorites. Ramps, red buds, and with the prickly pear cactus, I make a lot of Nepali tacos and fajitas, but I also make wine out of the fruits. It's so good, so good. Ramps, my all-time favorite wild food. I love ramps. I count down the days to ramp season. Red bud, common landscaping tree. The flowers taste like sweet peas. It's actually a leguminous tree. It's delicious. River beauty, rushes. You will be very interested in rushes, by the way. A lot of uses there. Salsify, saxifrage, shepherd's purse, Solomon seal, sorrel, sow thistle, spiderwort. Now, it was a surprise for me. I didn't even know spiderwort was edible until I started doing the research on this book last year. It's quite tasty. It's one of my favorites. It's what you call an ephemeral, one of those little spring flowers that comes and goes real quickly. Like trillium, which is also in the book. Spring beauty, that's a great one. Strawberry spinach, sweet Sicily, tansy, flapsy. You'll see many of these are, medicinal herbs as well, such as tansy, such as yarrow, such as rue, even. Let's see. Toothwort, trailing arbutus, twisted stalk. I eat a ton of that. It's all over the place in my yard. Valerian, edible valerian, actually, not the medicinal valerian. Violets, watercress and mountain watercress, water leaf, water lily, wild geranium, wild grapes. We're using the leaves in the spring. We use the fruit later on. Wild lettuce and prickly lettuce, wild onions and garlic, wild strawberries, wintercress, wintergreen, wisteria, and yucca. So you can see it covers quite a lot of plants. And along with this, get this book and put a plant ID app on your phone and get a good field guide just to double check that plant ID app. And you can go out in March and you can start cooking and eating and enjoying and getting all this great nutrition that's not in our domestic vegetables. It's been bred out of our domestic vegetables. A lot of herbal benefits too. And, eat the weeds, eat the wild stuff. And I love it. This is literally, I love medicinal herbs. I love to play music. I have many passions in life. Eating wild food is that's been with me from day one. Okay. You can tell I get excited about it. I get really excited about it. I love just to go out and pick a few leaves of this and a few leaves of this and a few flowers of this and that and chop a few wild herbs and maybe a couple things from the garden and just make a nice salad. And a lot of times a soup. I often eat soup for breakfast. I'll just keep a nice chicken stock or something going and I'll do the same thing. I'll just go out and pick whatever's in season, put it in a bowl, pour the boiling broth over it, let it sit for a minute and eat it. And it's, oh my gosh, it's good. It really is. Okay, so if you like to cook, you're going to love this book. If you like to go in the woods and if you enjoy foraging, you're going to love this book. If you are a prepper and you're thinking, what wild foods could I eat in a potential grid down situation, you're going to love this book. If you're an herbalist who wants to eat more herbs, incorporate more herbs into your diet, you're going to love this book. If you're just a person who likes to, go out on a hike and be able to identify wild plants and know their uses, you're going to like this book. But especially if you love to eat, because, I love to eat. I love to cook probably more than I love to eat for some reason, but I love to eat. This is not a vegetarian or vegan book. Let me just go ahead and warn you, okay? There are recipes in this book that are just, salads, of course. I cook with a lot of meat and fish and a lot of dairy, and there's a lot of meat, fish, and dairy in this. So don't think this is one of those this is not a esoteric hippie woohoo book. Of course, you know me by now. I don't write books like that. I write practical books for regular people, and this is a practical book for regular people, and even would work for someone who doesn't really have a lot of cooking skills because I kind of walk you through how to do the recipes, not just that's why I don't just give you a cup of this and teaspoon of that, and I actually explain to you the technique of how to cook them. So I'm really excited about this book. Well, of course, I hope it's going to be my most popular book yet. I hope that all my books when I put them out. But I think you're going to love this book. I really do. It's called The Spring Foraging Cookbook by Judson Carroll. It is right now live on Amazon. If you want it in paperback, you can get the ebook from me. I'll send it to you as a PDF. I'm really excited about this one, and I'm sitting here. It's January, and I'm just like counting the days till I can get out and start harvesting some ramps and a few trilliums. Some plants you don't want to take a lot of. Some of the other plants, the early spring asparagus and all the good stuff that I love so much. And I think if you get this book, I always say learn the skills in the winter that you want to use in spring and summer. So in the winter, you can get this book and you can read it and you can learn these skills so that as soon as the snow stops falling and the little green things start sprouting up again, you can go put this book to use and eat like a king. I mean, literally an ex-girlfriend of mine said, you eat like a king on like, $2 or $3 a day. And I'm like, yeah, I really do. And the reason is, one, I know how to cook. And two, I know how to source a lot of the food from the wild and from my garden and all that. I don't have to have a $200 grocery bill or subscribe to one of those food delivery sources. I just walk out back and pick what I need, and go catch a fish or go hunting or whatever I need to do. And yeah, I literally do. I actually have some old cookbooks, from like whether it's Apicius in ancient Rome or some from like the Middle Ages and such. I know how kings ate, and I know a lot of those really very classic recipes. Especially in French cooking, the classical French cooking. So now I just need to say thank you very much to my friend Michaela Plum. Completely unsolicited, she offered to edit my book. Proofread it, actually. I'd done the editing. She said, I'll proofread it for you before it gets sent out. I'm trying to get this one done kind of on a deadline. The magazine I write for, they wanted to do a review of it, and I had to get it in by January 1. Well, I had the book scheduled to be released actually like February 1. So I thought, well, I'm just going to, I'm going to put, 6 hours a day into this thing. I'm going to get it written, and then I'll edit it myself. I don't have time for anyone else to do it. And I said to her, I got it done, and I should be, in a week ready to put it out. And she said, would you mind if I proofread it for you? I know it's hard to read your own work. She knows I'm dyslexic. She was looking out for me. And she sent me back revisions. I had made about 200 or so typos and spelling errors that I couldn't catch myself. So she really, I told her she has a remarkable hidden talent, which is making me not appear dumb. So many, many thanks to Michaela Plum, whom I've mentioned before on the show. She's a great baker and cook, former professional ballet dancer who has those that exacting, rigorous mind, detailed. The same thing a professional dancer applies to baking. She took to proofreading my book, and I am extremely grateful. So y'all, if you want to get the book, like I said, it is the Spring Foraging Cookbook, Judson Carroll. It's on Amazon, or you can get it directly from me in PDF form. And as we always start the show with a recipe, I will start with a recipe. Let's start with the A's. And then we're going to get into a very interesting medicinal herb I haven't forgotten that, of course. It's Equisetum. Equisetum horsetail, one of the most useful herbs, considered a weed. This is one, if you're not using it yet, you're probably going to really want to look into. It's great for the skin, the teeth, joints. It's a wonderful herb, really is. So for the first recipe, actually in the book, my first recipe is alfalfa. But It, well, I give a recipe for a mayonnaise in that, a recipe for a mustard. It ends up being a very long recipe. I'll save that for another show because I'm basically building like this giant club sandwich with alfalfa sprouts. And if you break everything down from making the bread to making the condiments to everything, it takes a little bit. So let's start with amaranth. Amaranth is really common. It's a family of plants which are native to the Americas, and some were introduced by immigrants. In fact, it's mentioned by Dioscorides as a medicinal herb. Unfortunately, the amaranths are seldom appreciated for their fresh green foliage these days. Usually, they're either considered weeds or they're grown for their ornamental flowers and seeds. The seeds used to be, well, still can be, used as a grain. Then the feral amaranths are generally called by the term pigweed. While it's true that amaranth is a favorite forage for pigs, it should definitely not be forgotten that ancient civilizations owed their very survival in part to amaranth. The seed of amaranth was a staple for nutrition and was considered a sacred plant by some tribes, especially around Mexico and such, and Southwest and such as well. And to such extent that the Spanish, when they colonized the area, they can be pretty tough hombres, to put it mildly. They actually outlawed the growing of amaranth at different times to make the native peoples dependent on Spanish grain and kind of break their independence. But anyway, I enjoy amaranth as a spring green mostly, and I mean, like I said, the seeds are great for grain. You can definitely put them in bread and everything. But spring green, really one of my favorites. The leaves are very much like spinach. They can be eaten raw or prepared in any way you may like. The flowers are also edible, and several varieties of amaranth have been bred for the bright red ornamental flowers like Love Lies Bleeding and different ones. Really pretty plant. You might see them you can grow them ornamentally in your yard. I mean, you only have to just look for them in the wild. You can take the flowers of the greens, you can toss them in salad, cook in soups, along with any other tender greens you like, or just on its own. Seeds may be used as a meal, or you can just add them in to a wheat flour to make bread. I usually try to keep amaranth, chia, sunflower, poppy, and several other small seeds that are nutritionally dense on hand to just add to breads, muffins, cookies, even pancakes, or toss in with some wild rice. I also use these in making pemmican. I'll get into pemmican when we discuss rushes, but the seeds of several rushes and grasses are very nutritious. Pemmican is sort of a Native American beef jerky, sort of like venison jerky or any kind of meat, really. It can even be fish, smoked and dried, or dried and not smoked, doesn't matter. Mixed with fat and berries and nuts, it's actually quite good. So while amaranth can be grown in both the flower and vegetable garden, you're likely to find it basically anywhere weeds grow. I even found a nice batch of it in a shopping center parking lot. I think it was a Walmart growing on a median. But I want to go ahead and give you the warning. Be careful about harvesting by roadsides and parking lots due to contamination. The runoff, the petrochemicals, you don't want to harvest there. Amaranth growing on the edges of commercial farms and ditches should also be avoided as well because of runoff. All the fertilizers and pesticides tend to accumulate in those ditches, and you'll see lush patches of many edible and medicinal plants. Don't harvest there if you can avoid it. In the wild state, amaranth is fairly weedy. Garden varieties tend to be larger and more showy. If you find a wild weedy amaranth growing tall and lush, unfortunately, it's probably a sign that it's been contaminated by farming chemicals or landscaping chemicals. So while the greens of amaranth are nutritious and delicious, the seeds are the true nutritional and caloric powerhouse. In a survival situation, eating amaranth seeds could be the difference between life and death. The seeds contains proteins and fats that our bodies need. In normal times, they're useful as well as an addition to anything you might want to use seeds and grains in. Like I said, throw them in with your morning breakfast cereal if you wanted to. Cook with them. anyway, we'll get into a really good recipe here in a second. I usually just toss them into some sourdough wheat bread or with some granola. I like granola occasionally. They add taste and texture, and the nutritional benefit is a major bonus. These are really healthy for you. Um, I often combine the seeds with chia, buckwheat, sesame, and sunflower seeds, a few others, especially when making like granola or something. They have a really nice crunch and a good nutty flavor. Nutritionally, such small seeds are among the most caloric and nutrient dense of all foods. I mean, literally, like the Aztec armies used to march for days on just a few chia and amaranth seeds. I mean, they're just like a powerhouse of nutrition. So here's a soup I really like. It's great for this time of year. I mean, it's cold. I mean, I love soups, and this is a favorite that can be made either this way or using the stock recipe that I'll talk with later under wild onions. I give a great beef stock recipe on that one, a good chicken stock. But anyway, just use the broth or stock of your choice. And while I enjoy the flavor and body of traditional beef and barley soup, I'm actually not that fond of barley in soup. I'd rather use barley to make beer. I'm just not a barley soup eater. I don't know why, but I do like amaranth seeds in there, and several other small seeds actually. Um, Beef and barley soup is hearty on a cold, snowy day. I guess the barley is just a bit large and chewy. I guess that's the way I would put it. It's good, but it's kind of a little bit bigger and a little bit chewier than I want. But anyway, but I do get some barley soup flavor in the soup by adding some dark beer. So don't worry, we're not going to leave out the flavor. Unless using a stock made from beef bones and vegetables, choose some inexpensive, tough but fairly lean beef on the bone. A piece of shoulder roast or oxtail is perfect. Deer meat is even better since it comes with a lot of bones and offcuts that are hard to find in modern grocers and where we might buy our beef. You can also use chicken, pork, anything, scraps and bones. This is a dark soup, so either brown your meat and bones in the oven or in a pot with a little fat. We want to keep the broth from the broth of the meat and bones fairly lean. So once brown, don't use a fatty cut. In other words, this is where you want to use your tough meat. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So once the meat is brown, simmer the meat and bones with chopped onion, garlic, parsley, tomato, and carrot, etc. Anything you want to add in the water. Add a few herbs, at least some thyme, parsley, and celery leaves. A couple of bay leaves. Be sure to remove those before serving. And some peppercorns are perfect in this mix. Add a dark, lightly hopped beer. That's optional. I like it. Simmer and season to taste. Add at least a half cup of amaranth seeds. And simmer until the seeds are soft enough to eat. You want a little chew, but not crunch. Rice or other grains may be added as well, of course. Salt and pepper to taste. You may also toss in a few greens or cabbage. If you want to enrich the soup, add some butter, olive oil, or fat of your choice. In my opinion, this is a perfect soup to serve in a bread bowl. So if you bake your own bread, basically just make a little bowl, cut the top out, scoop out the inside, and fill it with the soup. I mean, it's fantastic. Then you eat the bread that's soaked up all the good broth, and I mean, that's good cold weather food, really. On a day like this, I could really go for that. For even better flavor, add some acorn meal to your wheat flour if you're making a bread bowl. Yeah, we'll get into that. We're going to talk about how to use acorns to make flour. Just make a small bowl or two. It's just a round, like a ball-shaped, loaf of bread. And cut it out and scoop it, like I said. I usually add the crumbs that I pulled out back into the soup just to thicken it, so you really don't waste anything. The top of the bread, you can even put a little oil on it and maybe a little garlic and fry it up into a crouton and dip it in there. You don't waste anything in my kitchen. Oh, or you could take that piece of bread and toast some cheese on it. Make a cheese toast and dip it in there. I mean, yeah, great stuff. In the Appalachian Mountains where I live, beef and barley or amaranth soups, etc., or a potato or wild onion ramp soup, absolutely perfect for St. Patrick's Day. And that's what I always associate with, really, because it's always cold, wet, and a little snowy, muddy, and absolutely nasty. St. Patrick's Day is just miserable around here. But this is a kind of rich, hearty soup that'll warm you up and go well, when you're relaxing by the fireplace. Maybe listen to some Celtic music. Put on the Pogues if you want some rockin' Celtic music, but maybe something more traditional, at least the Battlefield Band. By the way, if I don't have amaranth, I like steel cut oats. Oatmeal, but not the rolled oats, the instant mess that gets all gummy. The steel-cut oats make a great soup. I like that much better than barley. So it's a really good alternative, or you could combine it with amaranth and other seeds. The only thing I wouldn't use was chia. Chia has a gelatinous quality. It would make the soup into like a pudding, and I would not like that. Yeah, excellent alternative to tapioca, though, and far more nutritious. So, teas made from amaranth have traditionally been used for their astringent property to help with diarrhea and excessive menstrual bleeding. So, great medicinal properties as well. Whether you call it pigweed or whatever you want to call it, um, just make sure you're harvesting from a good, clean area, and you can absolutely, whether you want to grow it as a garden herb or find it in the wild, you can absolutely incorporate this, early spring edible plant into your diet. Whether you just use the greens and in the early spring, the flowers when they come in, or you save the seeds and you start cooking with them in soup, this time next year. You're going to love amaranth, and what a beautiful plant. Seriously, look up, you're going to want to have this one growing in your flower beds, and what a great way to have some survival food in your flower garden. And yeah, once you learn to identify the amaranths, you're going to start spotting them everywhere. They're weeds, so-called. I don't call them weeds. But now let's get into a medicinal herb that is also called a weed, ridiculously. And it is the Equisetum hymale, or Equisetum prealtum, I think is the way you pronounce that. These plants go under the name scouring rush, horsetail, which is the Equisetum. That means it's like a horse's tail, actually. So that's actually a pretty accurate name. Rough horsetail, scouring horsetail, scouring rush. Several variations on that name. I think if there's anything. No, I'm thinking horsetail and scouring rush are about the two most common names. Several varieties, very ancient plant. This is one of the oldest plants on earth. Before there were trees and bushes and little green herbs, the world was basically covered with ferns, giant asparagus the size of redwood trees, and horsetail. Yeah, it's one of the oldest plants on the face of the earth. Grows in most temperate regions of the world. It literally covered the entire planet. A million years ago or more. I don't know. So much of our oil, our petroleum, our tar, it is the remnants of ancient horsetails and other of these type plants that rotted down into what we now fuel our cars with. It's amazing. But among other things, this plant is super good as a medicinal herb. It's also one of our best sources of the mineral silica. If you've ever harvested them from the wild, be sure the area, if you ever harvest them from the wild though, be sure the area has not been contaminated by water or soil pollution. Horsetails absolutely absorb anything from the water and soil. And because they store minerals like silica and such, they will store mercury, they'll store lead, they'll store a lot of stuff you don't want to be eating. So don't harvest these in polluted areas. Make sure it's a nice, pristine place. Better yet, grow your own. The Grow Network actually sells some. Marjorie has sourced a good, clean source for horsetail because it is such a useful herb. And I'm sure Mountain Rose and other herb companies have good quality stuff as well. So going back to Dioscorides, ancient Greece. Dioscorides wrote of the herb as hipporus, which derives from hippo or horse. And he describes it. It kind of looks like the tail of a horse. If you were in somewhat of an altered state and looked at it, I think the scouring rush may be actually a better description. In German folk medicine, it's called shave grass, which makes sense. It kind of looks like a shaving brush at the top. But anyway, Father Nape actually said of Equisetum arvents, or shave grass, the manifold and excellent effects of this medicinal herb cannot be too highly estimated. It not only cleanses the house utensils, they actually use it as a scrub brush, for which it is considered a first-class polisher by all housewives, but it also heals the interior and exterior infirmities of the body. On old injuries, putrid wounds, and all, even gangrenous ulcers or caries, it's a cavity essentially, shave grass operates in an extraordinary manner. It washes away, dissolves, burns out, as it were, all that is injurious. The herb is used either as a decoction or for ablutions, bandages, vapors, and compresses, or it is wrapped up in a wet cloth and laid to the suffering part. The service rendered to the inner parts by shave grass are still more manifold. Its tea purifies the stomach, a cupful taken time to time, but not daily, eases the pains caused by gravel and stone disease, kidney and bladder stones essentially, and above all relieves the sufferers who have difficulty in discharging their urine. It has some diuretic effects. It helps with urination, especially when the urine doesn't flow easily, maybe from a prostate issue or an inflammation. For this alone, it is not to be replaced and is invaluable. Shave grass vapors, especially for this disease, are here only just hinted on. Such diseases are frightfully painful and so frequent. Take particular notice of this simple herb, which may be had without any trouble with it whatever. Such patients should take daily a cupful of shave grass tea together with the required exterior application. For bleeding, blood vomiting, it counts among the first and best teas. Those who vomit blood should take it without delay. I know of cases in which after 4 minutes, even a perfect cessation took place. That's amazing. In 4 minutes after drinking the tea, the person stopped vomiting blood, which is really serious. In cases of violent bleeding at the nose, such tea is drawn up through the nostrils. It operates in a contracting manner and is soon felt. It astringes the tissue, in other words. Such as are visited by hemorrhages, I recommend to drink daily 1 or 2 cupfuls of this tea, cups full of this tea. There should be a sufficient supply of shave grass kept in every home dispensatory so that in times of need, which occur suddenly, it may be quickly at hand. So, for Father Nape, one of the greatest herbalists of all time, Equisetum, Horsetail, scouring rush, shave grass, was considered a first aid remedy you absolutely had to have on hand for bleeding issues, essentially, and some inflammations of the bladder, kidney stones, and such. His protege was Brother Aloysius. He said that the herb was useful for bladder complaints, painful bladder gravel, stones, difficult urination, heavy bleeding, vomiting blood, nosebleeds, skin ulcerations, suppuration, cancerous sores, and as an astringent. Father Kunzel, the great Swiss herbalist, said of the entire Equisetum species that it thrives in some fields and one cannot get rid of it. So I guess that's why it's considered a weed. It likes anywhere it can find damp ground, essentially. It has often been condemned, and angry perpetrators have even invoked ghosts to try to rid themselves of it. So let's see if we can figure out how to use it usefully and not try to invoke ghosts to rid ourselves of it. Father Kunzel had a brilliant sense of humor. If you don't have my book, The Herbs and Weeds of Father Kunzel, that I co-wrote with Jolanta Wittem, that deserves a special place on your shelf. He was a hot-tempered, good-humored man. He'd have made a good Irishman, even though he was, I think, Swiss. So anyway, he said, he said of those ghosts, if they collected Horsetail in good time and used it, they would probably still be alive, and perhaps still grow as old as the old rabbi from Bashur, who said he would not make his last will before he had seen the Falklands Mountains green in summer and the white in winter for at least 90 times. So, old friend of his who was a rabbi. Pastor Nape called the herb Zinnkraut, Zinnkraut, which I assume is German for the same plant. I don't speak German. Good thing Jolanta did. And prescribed it for external use against rotting wounds or sitting over steam against suffering from stones. I have seen myself how an 86-year-old man recovered from the most terrible suffering from stones after a single steam remedy session, and then afterwards lived many more years. The horsetail heals the strongest blood flow, and taken as a tea in a very short time, almost instantly. So again, he considered it to be absolutely first aid. Later in the German tradition, around 1980, Maria Treben really loved horsetail, and she went into great detail, several pages in her books about horsetail, um, especially how it helps with bleeding, especially how it helps with bladder issues. She said for painful bladder, catarrh, congestion, and cramp-like pains, there is no better remedy than a decoction of horsetail. And she liked it as a tea, she liked it as a compress, used both ways. She said in cases where other diuretic means have failed, horsetail has helped. Um, she said, for example, in accumulated water in the pericardium, pleura, or in kidney disorders after scarlet fever and bad infectious diseases that result in water tension, excellent remedy internally and externally for the whole kidney and bladder system. She loved it for skin issues. She loved it for wounds. She loved it. I mean, she literally went on page after page. So I'm obviously not going to try at all to read all that. Her books. This is quoted in my book, the Weeds and Medicinal Grasses of the American South. So if you want to read everything she wrote about it, I think most of that was drawn from Help from God's Pharmacy and Help from God's Garden, two books she wrote in the 70s. Even used for perspiration, excessive perspiration of the feet, believe it or not. Fussbass made with horsetail. It was horsetail. Father Kunzel mentioned a rabbi friend he had. Deatra Cohen and Adam Siegel did a book called The Medicinal Herbs of the Ashkenazi Jews, I believe was the name of it. Wonderful book if you want to learn all about the Central European Jewish herbal tradition. They wrote that it was used to promote urination, treat kidney disease, used as a diuretic. We're just seeing the same uses over and over in different peoples and different cultures. In Russia, Igor Vilovich Zevin tells us that an old Russian manuscript refers to a coughing disease, that would probably be tuberculosis, that affected a beautiful young maiden in the town of Ryazan. The situation was so bad that blood dripped out of her mouth. And as he says, a probable reference to tuberculosis. The story describes how a local healer took her some shaved grass, which was ground like sand and stones, and gave it to the maiden. The sands and stones were placed on her chest, and the cough ceased. So even used as a topical remedy, a compress of horsetail. Gerard loves it. He went into great detail in England in the 1500s. He probably spent more time on how to identify and harvest this plant than just about any other plant in his book. But same, he's given the same remedies, the same uses. He said it was good either as a tea or infused in wine for bleeding of the nose and other fluxes of the blood. Helped with excessive menstrual flow. Good for the healing of wounds. Good for the bladder and the bowels. Helpeth ruptures and burstings. So even hernias and even worse. Boiled in wine, good for ulcers of the kidney and bladder and the cough and difficulty bleeding. Miss Grieve, I'll just skip ahead and just get her specific indications and uses, because she went into almost as much detail as Maria Treben. She liked it as a diuretic and astringent, beneficial in dropsy, gravel, and kidney affections generally, and a drachm of the herb powdered taken 3 or 4 times a day has proved very effectual in the spitting of blood. John Kehoe in the Irish tradition enjoyed it. He said a decoction if taken stops excessive menstruation, dysentery, so severe diarrhea, and all flows of the blood. If pounded and crushed, applied to wounds, it stops bleeding and any further inflammation. A decoction of the plant, good against cough and difficulty bleeding. The juice, if sniffed into the nose, will stop a nosebleed. Let's see what early American. The eclectics used Equisetum as a mild and simple diuretic, good for gravel, dropsy, or edema, irritation and inflammations of the urinary organs, strangury, suppression of the urine, and all similar affections. So, again, I guess I'll see what King's Medical Dispensatory says. Diuretic and astringent, good for dropsy, suppressed urine, hematuria, gravel, nephritic or kidney ailments, serious ones. Urinary incontinence, cystic irritation is a very serviceable remedy for cystitis. That's hard to say. Infusion, best way to use it. They like the infusion, so essentially a tea. Boy, they go on quite a bit too. I'm telling you, Equisetum is just really great. Let's get to more current uses. 1960s, Bradford Angier mentioned that the Paiute Indians burned and ground the leaves and used the ashes for cankers and gun sores, and the Shoshones did the same with the dried and powdered roots. Plants for a Future says that American Indians used it as a tea for kidney and bladder ailments, constipation. Asians consider the field horsetail diuretic and hemostatic, root given to teething babies. Folk remedy for bloody urine, gout, gonorrhea, stomach disorders. Poultice used for wounds. It has a very high silica content, as we mentioned. Also once used as a tea for tubercular lung issues, shown to be valuable against inflammations through scientific validity. Also used in tooth powders as a toothpaste. It's I think that's how Marjorie likes to use it. Really good for the teeth. Michael Moore, the herbalist, said the plant contains a lot of silica and calcium. If it has access to inorganic nitrates or fertilizer, it forms toxins. So don't have fertilized horsetail. Good in a mineral tea. Helps repair damaged tissues and worn out cells. Helps support cartilage, can prevent damage to lungs, kidneys, etc. that are chronically inflamed, and helps with fractures, so broken bones and such. He said specifically used to strengthen septum cartilage for acute cystitis or urethritis, inflammation and irritation, incontinence while sleeping from chronic cystitis, incontinence in aged males with enlarged prostate, poor bladder control, nephritis with edema, rheumatoid arthritis, menopause with early osteoporosis symptoms, as a tea combined with medicago, that's a clover, and angelica, it's Chinese angelica. Good for prostatitis with irritable bladder, dribbling, blood serum levels, creatinine, moderate elevation, renal cause, from a renal cause, that means failing kidneys essentially. Nutritional malabsorption and moderate parathyroid imbalances. Plants for Future states medical use of field horsetail. It has an unusual chemistry compared to most other plants. It is rich in silica, contains several alkaloids, including nicotine, by the way, and various minerals. Horsetail is very astringent and makes an excellent clotting agent, staunching wounds, stopping nosebleeds, and reducing coughing of blood. It helps speed repair of damaged connective tissue, improving its strength and elasticity. The plant is anodyne, anti-hemorrhagic, antiseptic, astringent, carminative, diuretic, galactagogue, hemostatic, and vulnerary. That's a very medicine cabinet right there. The green infertile stems are used. They are most active when fresh, but it can also be harvested in late summer and dried for later use. Sometimes ashes of the plant are used. The plant is useful as a diuretic taken internally, and the treatment of kidney and bladder problems, cystitis, urethritis, prostate disease, and internal bleeding, proving especially useful when there is bleeding in the urinary tract. A decoction applied externally will stop the bleeding of wounds and promote healing. It is especially effective on nosebleeds. Decoction of the herb added to a bath benefits slow healing sprains and fractures, as well as certain irritable skin conditions, such as eczema. The plant contains equisetic acid, which is thought to be identical to aconitic acid. Substance is a potent heart and nerve sedative that could be a dangerous poison when taken in high doses, so don't do that. The plant contains irritant substances and should be only used for a short period of time, and best used under supervision of a qualified practitioner. That was the whole Horsetail family. They say the same of Equisetum, Flavidiol, Himali, Pratense, Sylvaticum. It's a big family. It's a very big family. Botany in a Day says that Horsetail contains significant quantities of silica from 5 to 8%, plus silic acids and saponins. It makes an excellent abrasive pad for cleaning cookware. Silica content is beneficial for hair and fingernails. The roots of some species are starchy and edible. Medicinally, a tea of the plant is diuretic and astringent, useful for urinary tract infections, intestinal bleeding, excessive menstruation, or external bleeding. Horsetail is also rich in calcium and other constituents believed beneficial for mending fractured bones and connective tissues. The plant contains thiamine, an enzyme that destroys B1 stored in the body. Cooking destroys the enzyme, and renders the plant safe, so not to be used raw. But however, the high silica content can irritate the urinary tract and kidneys with excessive use. And we'll get to the physician's desk reference for herbal medicine, get the final official medical word on this wonderful plant, this wonderful plant that has unfortunately been classified as a weed. Horsetail has a mild diuretic and spasmolytic action in animal tests. The flavonoids and silic acid contribute to the astringent effect. The drug has shown to increase diureses and reduce uric acid. That's actually very important. It reduces the uric acid content in the blood by increasing uric acid clearing and excretion rates. So yes, very useful in kidney disorders and such. Plasma composition was improved, as well as excretion of calcium and anorganic phosphorus. Unproven use. In folk medicine, Equisetum arvense is used for tuberculosis, catarrh in the kidneys, that's congestion, and bladder regions as a hemostatic, that means reduces bleeding, for profuse menstruation, nasal, pulmonary, and gastric hemorrhages, for brittle fingernails, for loss of hair, for rheumatic diseases, gout, poorly healing wounds and ulcers, swelling and fractures, and for frostbite. Horsetail is contraindicated in patients who have edema due to impaired heart or kidney function. Health risks or side effects following proper administration of designated therapeutic doses are not recorded. A doctor should be consulted when the drug is utilized as a bath additive in cases of major skin lesions, acute skin lesions of unknown origins, major feverish and infectious diseases, cardioinsufficiency, and hypertonia. So, fairly safe herb, very, very important herb. This is one you need to learn to identify, preferably even try to grow some if you have in a damp spot on your property. Make sure it's not been contaminated. Like Father Nape said, it's a great first aid herb, if nothing else, but can be very useful for a number of chronic conditions as well. So y'all, that's it. Have a great week. I'll talk to you next time. Please buy my book. I think you'll really enjoy it. It's the Spring Foraging Cookbook by Judson Carroll. Always appreciate when you buy my books. That's what keeps me going.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.